So huge regeneration potential. My simple test is if in 20 years' time, the managers working there don't come from Thurrock, then we failed. Okay? It's all well and good saying, well, the crane drivers might be from Thurrock, you know, the office cleaners, the administrators, but actually the managers need to come from Thurrock. That means we might need to have a look at our housing choice, we need to have a look at leisure provision and cultural provision and all the bits that will support those managers living in Thurrock or very close to Thurrock. But actually I want this year's crop of pupils, next year's pupils, the year after they're coming through GCSE and A-level to get those jobs and to progress within that environment so that the managers on that location come from Thurrock. Support West End theatre, that support touring, rock groups that support performance space. So that becomes exciting. We then build artist studios alongside that. We have a higher level conference venue and we create some business units for SMEs to flourish in the area in that creative and cultural skills industry. And suddenly we have employment in a sector that's not been available to Thurrock residents before on our doorstep with a pretty good anchor tenant with the name of the Royal Opera House. And we talk about opera in Thurrock now. Local community groups getting involved in opera because of the outreach work by the Royal Opera House. The opportunity to build a new town centre. About £750 million of investment, backed by about £65 million of public sector funding, government spending, and over the next 15-20 years the council will take on the responsibility of making this happen. You know, 2,500 to 3,000 new homes, a new town centre focused around the railway station, new, perhaps slightly more intense development going towards the Thames, opening up the Thames for access to everybody and making sure that Purfleet is a real community and engaging with the Garrison estate just to the west and making sure that gets a real hold. So is it that all residents have the skills and experience to compete for the best jobs? Is it easier access to higher and further education to improve their educational standards? The opportunity to gain fairly paid work or support to overcome the barriers to work like poor health and social circumstance. So as a business leader, which of those four would you say is most important? The skills and experience that's needed to get people to compete for the best jobs. But a reasonable amount of support at the other end, but a clear winner in terms of that sense of priority. And the infrastructure around that. Quality of housing so that people want to live locally and work locally. Enabling local businesses, existing local businesses to support it to create jobs, or encouraging new employment sectors like the creative and cultural sector into the area. So an interesting mix between transport, communications and business support infrastructure, clearly a priority for a number of businesses, and supporting existing local businesses to create jobs. Okay, I suppose my guess is we would hear that from existing businesses, but actually we have some inward investors here as well. Objective. So the options here are what's most important to you as a business. Is it playing an active role in the local community? Having an opportunity to influence decisions that affect your local community? Improving community infrastructure, so health centres, village halls, community halls, etc. Or being part of celebrating Thurrock through leisure arts and tourism and making sure we value the assets that we have. Okay, if I could have your votes between those four. We did some work, we surveyed our own departments and partners around how they engage with businesses, and probably it's half and half really. 50% are regulatory, they're the bits that you might not appreciate, certainly in the first instance. About half of it is about support and communications. So an interesting mix, and we have an interesting role, because you know, all local government and public sector has been talking about customer first and becoming customer centric. Well actually, when it's the environmental health officer knocking on your door saying you're creating a nuisance and you've got to do something about it, which means you've got to spend money, which isn't improving your business product but is improving your relations with your community, sometimes customer-centric isn't quite the right phrase. We might want to do things politely and nicely, but actually you're not going to value that customer contact in the first instance. So we have to recognise that sometimes our relations with business start from a regulatory point of view, and sometimes they start from a business. Looking at the issue, talking to local businesses, bringing their experience for most councillors of many years within the community, understanding what makes Thurrock tick, and representing businesses and the local community. And we've met with some of the business networks. And you know, I think it's an interesting challenge. We do have business networks that are active in the area, maybe what we haven't done is pull them together quite as we might have done. We've got the Thurrock Business Alliance to the BNI through the Federation of Small Businesses. We've had an embryonic meeting of the Chamber. So we've got a number of ways of bringing businesses together. I'm not sure we're making the most value out of those, but we're trying to resources. We've got the Development Corporation being wound up and a lot of their business engagement programs finished at the end of last year. What can we do? Well, the first is trying to encourage people to upgrade to thurrockbusiness.net as a portal for business use, and using that to talk about what's happening in the area, what the opportunities are. Setting up a regular business board meeting with senior members and with people that chair all those local business networks. Getting them together to understand, again, what it is the council can do. Recognising good practice elsewhere. One of the things about Farrant to me is it hasn't taken much advantage of what goes on in the rest of the world. So talking to other similar authorities and saying, okay, what is good about the way they engage with businesses, what can we bring into our area? And certainly from my experience, both at Birmingham with a very, very strong chamber, which actually enabled really good sector-led discussions with business. We don't have that sort of infrastructure. So if we want to talk to, I don't know, if we want to set up a river users group with the Port London Authority and big business that uses the river, in Birmingham there would be an existing infrastructure for doing that. Here, we have to create that, we have to make sure that that's in place. Looking at partnering with Basildon Council with review plans and understanding what's happening in the environment and actually access to information about contracts, presumably with a view to bidding for those contracts and getting an opportunity to increase your business on the back of still not inconsiderable public sector spend in the area. And just to put that in context, we spend about £360 million a year on a whole range of services, including support to schools. There's probably about 60 or 70 million of that goes straight through the council's hands to schools, for example. Of the balance, we've got about £70 million spent on staff and about 220 or so million pounds spent outside, spent with you, with businesses, whether it be local business providing a specific service like care homes, etc., to businesses like Vertex who do some outsourced back office, or to real businesses and suppliers that sell us paper or other goods or carry out works on our behalf. So about £220 million a year we're contracting externally. It's quite an interesting amount in terms of the spend in the local economy. And that local leadership, probably much more than the council has done. What I am confident is the council has recognised the agenda and the need to step up to the plate to provide that local leadership. We will see as time goes on, as the Development Corporation gets wound up, as those last vestiges of those other organisations go, how we can work with you much more effectively. But I do think the landscape that I've set out actually gives us a really great opportunity. I would like to take the opportunity of thanking you all for being here today, because actually your engagement in events like today will enable us to provide you with a better support service as we go forward, and those number pads and the voting will really help us to shape the agenda going forward.